Saul Canelo Alvarez versus Jaime Munguia for all 4 belts at super middleweight, 168 pounds. Now, Canelo's 60 wins with 2 losses, and 39 of those wins coming by way of knockout. Now, arguably, 2 of those losses, or both losses, were not at his true weight division at that time. Remember, his first loss came against Floyd Mayweather, where Floyd cleverly forced Alvarez to come in at 152, which was 2 pounds lighter than that super welterweight division that he was fighting at that time. And then his second loss was at 175 to Dmitry Bivol. Again, arguably, even though he won against Sergey Kovalev at that same weight, 175 isn't truly Alvarez's weight division. Now, on the other hand, Munguia is undefeated. He's 43-0 with 34 KOs. But there is definitely not just an age difference, there's also that experience difference, right? So Canelo's 33 years old, and he's had an 18-year boxing career thus far, whereas Munguia's 27, and he's had an 11-year boxing career thus far. So they both started when they were 15 and 16. They were still young enough to be fighting in the youth division as amateurs, but they turned pro pretty young. And the beginning of their careers in many ways are very parallel to each other. But in any case, let's put the overlap of their careers in perspective. So when Jaime Munguia made his pro debut, 2 months later, Alvarez was fighting Floyd. So from that point forward, as Munguia was basically fighting absolute no-names in Mexico, just as one should do to build one's career and learn one's craft as a teenager, the same time, Floyd was fighting just only big names for 12-round fights. Like, he's fighting Lara, James Kirkland, Miguel Cotto, Amir Khan, Triple G. So that gives you kind of an idea of the sort of time shift difference in how their careers were going in parallel. So that said, in my opinion, I think Canelo should win this fight versus Munguia. He should be able to use his experience and ring smarts to break Munguia down over the course of the rounds, be patient, and just break him down. But the interesting thing, I think, is there's still a chance that Munguia could pull an upset and defeat Alvarez, especially if Canelo made one crucial, fatal error in his training camp, and if at the same time, if Munguia is able to put everything together and remain absolutely coachable with Freddy Roach in his corner throughout the entire fight. So, in other words, if Alvarez is not 100% and Munguia is at exactly 100%, I think there's a possibility that Munguia could pull off the W. But and I'll circle back to that to break down what I think that fatal flaw could be for Alvarez. But I just wanted to kind of quickly recap a few high points in both fighters' careers. Notably, I think when I first noticed Canelo and when I first noticed Munguia. So as I said, they both started their careers out as teenagers and just fought frequently against basically no names in Mexico to slowly build up from 4 rounds, 6, 8, 10, and 12 So by the time they were in their early 20s, they'd had at least 20 fights under their belt, and they were already fighting 10 and 12 round fights in Mexico. Now, I first noticed Canelo when he fought Miguel Cotto's brother, Jose Miguel Cotto, on the Floyd Mayweather Shane Mosley undercard. This was back in 2010. Now, interestingly, that fight was made at a catch weight of 150 pounds. So I think this was the point where Alvarez was just trying to make the shift from 147 to 154. So they conveniently just set up a fight for him at catch weight. So I guess so he could just sort of test himself out at a slightly higher weight. But I remember watching this fight with my friends in New York City, and my buddy was just cracking up because he goes, "What do you mean this kid's Mexican? He's got a Jewish first name, and he looks like he's Irish because he's got that red hair." And so that was sort of the thing that kind of stuck out to us the most, was just there's just something different about Canelo, right? But he was impressive because he stopped Jose Miguel in what was scheduled, I think, for a 12-round fight. Or maybe it was 10 and he stopped him in the 9th, something like that. In any case, he did make an impression right off the bat. Now, Jaime Munguia, I noticed when he fought Saddam Ali back in 2018. Now, full disclosure, I was definitely rooting for Saddam Ali because he's a product of New York City amateur boxing. You know, he's one of the few New York City boxers to make a U.S. Olympic team in recent memory, and then he went on, of course, to turn pro. And in the fight before he fought Munguia, he had captured the WBO 154-pound belt by defeating the legendary Miguel Cotto. And I was watching that fight very closely and was just super relieved that they didn't rob Saddam of that victory. And so I was super happy for him to win that WBO 154-pound strap. And then when I heard he was going to fight this young Mexican guy who took the fight on very short notice, I thought, oh, Saddam's just going to beat this guy. But it turned out to be exactly the opposite. Jaime Munguia dropped Saddam 4 times, I think, within the first 4 rounds, and then stopped him. And it was like not just like flash knockdowns; they were like real solid knockdowns. So that just caught my attention and really opened my eyes. Now I do still have a question about that fight, which is I couldn't find any sort of post-fight interviews with Saddam Ali, but I would really love to know from his point of view how he felt that fight went down and what went wrong for him in that fight versus Munguia. But nevertheless, I mean, I think he certainly caught my attention, and you certainly had to give him credit for coming in on short notice and basically capturing that belt and with those very explosive punches. So in several ways, both Canelo and Munguia have had similar careers in that they both started fighting professionally when they were teenagers. They both started out at 140 and then moved up to 147, and then they both held 154-pound titles and defended them like 5 or 6 times each before moving up to 160. Now when Canelo moved up to 160, of course, then he started doing that weird weight division jumping around where he'd go up to 168, 175, back down, and then it seems like since 2022 he's decided to settle in at 168. And on Munguia's side, notably he did defend that WBO 154-pound strap 5 times before moving up to 160. Now, he didn't hold a world title at 160, but he won a minor belt, and notably he fought 3 times at 160. One of those fights was versus Gabe Rosado. Now, that's important because working Gabe's corner for that fight was Freddy Roach. So we'll come back to that, but that was just 3 years ago in 2021. Now, notably, Munguia's fight in 2023 versus Sergey Derevyanchenko is notable because it was a very tough fight for both men. It was a great fight. If you haven't seen that, you should definitely check that out. But Munguia managed to eke out or get the win by dropping Sergey very dramatically in the 12th and final round. Now, Sergey beat the count, but that knockdown basically secured Munguia the victory, and it was a very dramatic fight. But notably, I think Munguia realized that he took too much damage in that fight, notably the left side of his face, because he was getting caught with hard right hands. So I think at that point, that's when he decided he needed to switch camps, and he sought out Freddy Roach, which I think has turned out to be a very positive decision. And in fact, I think the fact that Munguia is working with Freddy Roach could be a determining factor in this fight against Canelo Alvarez for a couple of reasons. But before we get into sort of the tactics and logistics of the actual fight, I'd like to go over just a few technical technical breakdown of both Canelo Alvarez and Jaime Munguia. So for as a quick comparison, according to John Ryder, who's a very recent common opponent for both Alvarez and Munguia, John Ryder said on the in a ProBox TV interview that essentially Canelo Alvarez's power is more thudding, whereas Munguia's power is more snapping, and that makes a lot of sense given the difference in their physique and the difference in their fighting style. So Canelo Alvarez has more of a stockier build, so it sort of makes sense that his power would be kind of thudding, because he's just of how he's generating the power from a more stockier upper body, whereas Munguia, being the slightly more lankier fighter, would generate power by just with a lot of torque on his punches. And then their fighting styles also make sense in terms of how John experienced their power. So Canelo Alvarez is far more of a counterpuncher, so sort of setting back and waiting to counter with a hard thudding shot, whereas Munguia is a little more on the offense and likes to throw combinations, so it makes sense that his power would come through as being more snappy, as John put it. So I think let's go over Canelo's strong points. So key point is that I think Canelo learned a lot from that loss versus Floyd, and one of the key things is he started to value slickness, and by that I don't mean like he's trying to copy Floyd's shoulder roll. He's not, but he does make a lot of use of just turning his torso or leaning back with his torso. And I think he realized that just making subtle angular movements like that can avoid a punch or deflect a punch, number one. So you're sort of expending a minimal amount of effort to achieve the same effect, make the miss. And at the same time, by making somebody miss so subtly, it's also very it can be very demoralizing, because I'm sure Canelo felt that. He was sort of on the receiving end of being demoralized by Floyd's slickness in the ring. The second thing I think he learned from Floyd was just how valuable great footwork is, because that just leads you right to having wonderful ring generalmanship and just complete control of the whole ring canvas. But I do have a couple of questions about that. So, given the fact that Alvarez does have great footwork, why is it that he sometimes just chooses to put himself on the ropes, in spite of his corner telling him, don't put yourself on the ropes? So, for example, he did that in the first fight versus Triple G, and then of course he did that again with Bivol, just kind of waving them in, putting his back against the ropes and waving the other fighter in. Has anybody heard from Canelo why he chose that tactic more than once? Now that leads me to another question, which is one of the strong points I think I noticed in Canelo early in his career, which really stood out to me, especially when he fought Carlos Baldomir, the fellow who upset Zab Judah to take a world belt. Canelo fought Baldomir at the Staples Center in Los Angeles, and it was really apparent to me that he was truly listening to his corner between rounds, and I thought, that's wonderful. He's such a coachable fighter, that it makes me wonder, fast forward to him putting his back against the ropes, why is he not listening to them anymore? Has he suddenly has he become less coachable as he's become more successful? Maybe you guys have heard something more about that, but that's a question I still have. Now that leads me to present moment. At the weigh-in, apparently Canelo was about 1.5 pounds under the limit, which may not affect the outcome of the fight at all, but it just, again, leads me to wonder, so what's going on? Because you're Canelo Alvarez, you're an absolute superstar. Surely there's at least one or maybe two people in your camp whose sole responsibility is to help you, come in at like 167.5, 167 3/4, but at the weight limit. And surely somebody in your camp is in charge of having your own personal scale calibrated to the official scale, and then having whatever food it is or drink it is that Canelo likes to have before weigh-in or right after the weigh-in. Surely that's somebody's responsibility. He's got enough finances to assign somebody that job. So if he's coming in 1.5 pounds under the weight, that tells me either that person didn't do their job, which doesn't sound likely to me, or Canelo just kind of brushed it off and said, don't worry about it. I already know what I'm doing. I already done this. Maybe that's a little more likely, that Canelo just doesn't really listen to people as much as he used to. I'm not sure. But, I don't think that 1.5 pounds under is going to make or break him in the ring. But it's just an odd occurrence when somebody is on that level as a fighter. So one other thing to know about Canelo is that he does not always lead with the jab. In fact, sometimes he likes to just lead with that big left hook to the body, which seems to be one of his favorite punches. And he tends to throw that with his torso perfectly upright. Now another habit that Canelo has is that he'll put up the double guard and then lean right in over his lead foot. Like he'll lean straight in. Munguia used to kind of do the same guard but lean a little bit more over to his left, which I think was debilitating because it kind of froze him over his lead foot, whereas Canelo, just by staying very sort of centered over his lead foot, could kind of then suddenly lean back, which is what he was waiting to do. He was trying to like bait his opponent into punching at him so he could suddenly shift his torso back and counterpunch. So if Canelo decides he's going to start doing that versus Munguia, the key thing for Munguia to do there is to feint a lot and to throw combinations and not just throw one punch or two punches that Canelo can read and then counter. But I mean, the good thing about that is this is something that Freddy Roach is very good at teaching. So let's take a look at Munguia's strengths. Well, certainly again we both fighters have power, but I think one of the main differences is that Munguia does love to throw combinations, a little more so than Canelo does. Canelo seems to throw, one or two punch combinations, and then every now and again in spurts he'll string together more punches, but it's far more sporadic. Now Munguia really loves this one combination, which is jab, right hand, and then he's dipped over to his left, so he comes in with a left body shot, and then right away he comes right upstairs with left hook to the head. Now I really like that because that left hook to the body kind of momentarily freezes the opponent when it lands, and then they're right there for the left hook to land on the chin. Now for whatever reason, Canelo just digs to the body but doesn't come upstairs with a left hook. It's sort of a classic combination that should be in every boxer's repertoire, and it's good to see Munguia use that repeatedly. That seems to be one of his bread and butter combinations. Now the one thing I'll add as a tangent, as I sort of wish he would just add this on at the end, is do the 1-2 to the head, left dig to the body, and then come upstairs with a left hook, right hand, left hook in rapid succession. Now a great fighter to look at for this, even though they're not a boxer, is the late great Raymond, he calls himself Raymond Dekkers, the Dutch kickboxer. That was one of his favorite three-punch combinations to end a sequence, was that left hook, right hand, left hook. And he was just masterful at that because he delivered it explosively, and it was very fast, and it was very powerful. So if you're a fight fan, even though Dekkers isn't a boxer, I encourage you to check out not just his kickboxing fights, but check out him training in the gym, and check out him teaching kickboxing seminars as well. So that's just a little side note. But okay, so back to Munguia. So now, even though his footwork isn't as educated as Canelo's, he tends to just be going in and coming out. The thing I do like about Munguia is he does have live feet all the time. He's not flat-footed. So when he's on the outside, he does this sort of little bounce steps. So the good thing about him having live feet is that a coach like Freddy Roach really likes to work tight angles. And the fact that Munguia has live feet means if Freddy has started to teach him how to do that, his feet are in motion enough that he can just make these small adjustments and hopefully put into play whatever Freddy's trying to teach him as far as cutting angles. I'm going to assume that they're working on that. And on that note, I think, while I'm wondering if Canelo's still a coachable fighter, I'm assuming that Munguia's all ears with Freddy, seeing as this is just, he just started working with him, and that Munguia did have great success, in fact, like the stoppage versus John Ryder, with Freddy Roach working his corner. So to note, I did see already that I think Munguia has improved his defense now that he started working with Freddy. Freddy is very defense minded, but he's also he doesn't just do defense offense. He wants the defensive move to flow right into an offensive move. In other words, your defense sets you up, you're in position to fire back right away with a hard counters. Now, remember I said the fact that Munguia fought Gabe Rosado was an important point because Freddy was working Gabe's corner for that fight. Now, Gabe was about 10 years older than Munguia at the time, I think. Gabe was in his mid-30s and Munguia was in his mid-20s. But Gabe extended him for the full 12 rounds. Now, I have to think a lot of that credit has to be given to Freddy for guiding Gabe through that. Now, I wish I could have found a version of that fight broadcast that included the corner work so I could hear what Freddy was telling Gabe, but I couldn't find that. If anybody knows where that is, please let me know in the comments. But the point here is that in preparation for that fight, Freddy's very much a researcher, and he really studies whatever opponent he's up against, whether this is a world title fight or he's just bringing somebody up and the fighter's not even known yet. Freddy always does his film study, so that implies to me that he really studied the heck out of Jaime Munguia, and he knew every single one of Jaime's weaknesses and how to take advantage of it going into that fight with Gabe Rosado. So now fast forward, that makes sense, or it's really great that Freddy's now coaching Munguia because he already broke him down a couple of years ago, so he already knows who he's working with before Jaime even walked in for the first session. Now that said, any effective boxing coach knows that you can't hit a fighter with, oh my gosh, you got this laundry list of things you're doing wrong. I'm sure Freddy wouldn't even tell him everything he's already analyzed because that would just be too discouraging for anybody to hear, right? Instead, I think what Freddy would do is look at all of Munguia's strong points and make sure he's emphasizing those strong points in the gym, and then he would just select the most important weaknesses for him to address, and just maybe those are just one or two things. So one thing I think I see is that Munguia is holding his guard hand a little bit higher or at a little bit different angle to sort of protect that left side of his face a little better. From the little bit of footage that I was able to see of Munguia training, and mind you, again, I think these are clips put together from somebody's social media or maybe his social media, so it's all vetted, right? But from what I could tell, it seems that Freddy has Munguia doing a lot of what we call cushion work. So you're familiar with mitts, right? Those are the little mitts that people have on their left hand and their right hand. But there's another object that you hit that's called a cushion. It's just round. It usually has a smaller target area right in the middle, and then it's got two handles on either side. So it's, instead of being two mitts, it's just one big cushion, and the trainer has to maneuver it around for the fighter to hit. Now, me personally, I hated hitting that thing because it felt like it just sucked the energy and the power right out of you. I mean, you have to hit that thing with a lot of power, but it's draining, but it helps develop power. So it's a great training tool, but the thing is, whoever's holding it has to know what the heck they're doing, because it's also very dangerous for the person who's holding it. Number one. Number two, if you don't know how to hold it, it's really not of much help to the fighter. So, that said, I did notice that Freddy had at least two of, or I'm assuming it's Freddy's, because he's the head trainer, had at least two of his assistant trainers holding that cushion for Jaime. So that to me is super reassuring, because he's like gonna max out on what Jaime's already really good at, which is throwing powerful punches, specifically powerful left hooks to the body and powerful left hooks to the head. Why would you not? I also noticed that Freddy had his assistant trainer Marvin Samorio doing mitts with Jaime Munguia, and Marvin is a very, very precise mitt person, so I would imagine that's more for the precision and combinations, and then of course Freddy himself would do mitts with Munguia. So I mean, I think it's a good mixture, and it's sort of reassuring that Freddy's playing to Munguia's strengths and likely addressing some of the weaknesses, although that should definitely remain behind their own closed doors at Wildcard. Now, back to the one fatal flaw that Canelo might have made during his training camp. And this is, I'm just basing this off of the footage that the promotion put out for their sort of behind the scenes build up. So it's apparently Canelo says that his wife insisted that they visit him every 15 days or something like that, and so he said, okay, happy wife, happy life. So there she was with the kids. Okay, so I will kind of defer to the men listening to this, because you know better than I how that dynamic plays out, so to speak. But if Canelo gave in and left his legs in the bedroom, shall we say, then that could turn out to be a big problem in the ring. It would be a problem in the ring in any fight, but certainly against a powerful puncher like Jaime Munguia. Now, it also kind of makes me wonder if that's why Canelo sometimes decides he's going to put his back against the ropes and try to play rope-a-dope, counterpunch off the ropes. Is it because he knows he doesn't have his legs with him to keep moving around the ring? Is he that sort of, I don't know what the word is. Surely he knows better than to do that, but is he thinking, well, it's just something that he can get away with? So, I mean, he is a big superstar. He's been a superstar for a long time. I'm sure temptation lurks around every corner for him in that regard. But, I mean, that's just like an old school thing that boxing trainers would always, like watch out for with their fighters, is to, no girlfriends, no wives, etc. No going out and partying. And of course, there are fighters who manage to sneak out and do things anyways. I will not mention any names, but it's completely known to happen, even in a camp where a trainer's trying to keep his fighter on lockdown. To their chagrin, fighters will sneak all kinds of things in or out of their camp, including, of course, food. So, for example, the late great trainer Hector Roca used to joke about how is it possible that his fighter would weigh more in the morning than they did before they went to bed at night, because he was so worried about them sneak eating that he would weigh them before they went to bed, and he'd weigh them as soon as they got up in the morning. So since they weighed more, he knew darn well that someone was either sneaking them food or that they had food hidden in their bedroom. But yeah, I mean, you can substitute something else for food, I suppose. So, point being, I hope Canelo didn't make that error in his camp. Now, on the other side of the coin, the one thing Munguia can do that I really think could turn the tide in his favor is to land that combination I was telling you about, the jab right hand, left hook to the body, and then come upstairs with a left hook to the head. Because the left hook is, they'll tell you, a seasoned fighter would tell you, left hook is the most dangerous punch in boxing because you don't see it. You can't see it. It's coming from outside your peripheral. And Munguia has a very precise left hook to the chin. So if he's able to land that cracker, that could turn the tide of the fight. And I'm sure that Freddy Roach has been working on just getting that sequence even tighter with Jaime, because I mean he knows way more than and I know that much. So I think we gotta watch out and see if Jaime is able to set up that left hook to the head off the left body shot, or maybe off the right hand. So again, just to reiterate, yeah, I think Canelo should win the fight, given how much more experience he has in terms of not only fighting in the ring, but preparing and knowing how to prepare and how to be under the bright lights in Vegas. How many times has he done this before? Whereas this is Jaime's arguably his biggest sort of fight to date. So experience is all in Canelo's favor, but hopefully he didn't make a fatal error. And who knows, even if Canelo didn't make an error, but Munguia is just incredibly coachable throughout the entire fight. If he listens to Freddy between rounds and follows the instructions going out into the next round, I think it's quite possible that Jaime Munguia pulls off an upset. Who do you think's going to win the fight? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for listening.